Now, I'm pleased to introduce our first Inspire speaker of day 3, Vicky Blades. Vicky is a professional actress, a voice and confidence coach with her business Generally Speaking, and an erstwhile Cambridge CELTA graduate. Passionate about helping people to speak up, speak out, and be heard, Vicky combines drama and coaching techniques to encourage people to face their fears, find their authentic voice, and have fun. During Vicky's session, we recommend watching in speaker view. Take it away. Please share your screen, Vicky.
Thank you so much, David. I'm delighted to be here. I'm really excited. And I've got you all for half an hour, which is fantastic. Hope you've enjoyed the conference so far. It's packed with some amazing content, which I'm sure you've found out. And I hope you're not too tired on this, the last day. I've got you, as I say, for half an hour, and I'm now going to share my screen. I can make this happen. There it is. Give me a second because I'm not in presentation mode. Right, here we go. So I've started at the end. That's a good place to start. I'm going to whiz through the presentation backwards. Here is my favorite quote before we get going from the wonderful Maya Angelou. Words mean more than what is set down on paper. It takes the human voice to infuse them with deeper meaning. And as teachers, you know that is true. It's how we speak as much as what we say that's so important. And that's, I guess, what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So I've been invited to tell you a little bit about being brilliantly you on screen. And that's because, as David said, I'm an actress. I'm also a voice and confidence coach. I have a particular interest in voice and teaching voice. And I do that alongside my acting. I have a master's degree in acting for media, which is TV, film, and radio. So lots of experience on screen. And of course, that has come in very handy these last few months when everybody's having to work online and having to get used to this medium of being on screen constantly. So my company logo is down there, it's Generally Speaking, and I'm going to talk about some practicalities about presenting on screen, some of which, probably most of which you know already, so we might whiz through that bit. Connecting with your audience, which is super important, and I'll give you some tips for doing that. And then I've got a little section called Help, where I'm going to talk about some of the most common questions and issues that come up around communicating on a screen. I'm very happy for you to ask questions. I'm going to do my very best to leave 5 minutes at the end to answer those. I suggest you put them in the Q&A, but I won't get a chance to look at them until that last 5 minutes. So fingers crossed we'll get some of your questions answered. Right, so this is my #1 tip for absolutely anybody presenting on a stage, in a classroom, online. First of all, you need to breathe and slow down. Now, you will know this as teachers of English as a foreign language because, of course, we have a tendency to speak very quickly, particularly if English is your first language. We also speak quickly when we're nervous, and we have that tendency to rattle on and want to get it over and done with, which I totally understand. So this is my #1 tip for absolutely anybody presenting anywhere, and that includes myself, because I often forget to breathe and slow down. So that is something you should probably put on a Post-it note right by your screen, because I find it invaluable. Now, my other favorite mantra that I'm always telling people is to over prepare, but under rehearse. And I'm going to explain that a little bit, because as an actress, you can imagine we do a lot of rehearsing. However, on screen acting, we do very little rehearsing. It's very different to theatre. We do, however, do a lot of preparation. And in the acting world, that might be character study, it might be research into your character's job or situation. Obviously, as teachers, you are super prepared with every lesson and your lesson plans and your resources and so on. So I don't doubt that you will always be over prepared. But what I mean by under rehearsed is that there can be a tendency sometimes for people to follow a script, particularly if you do feel a bit nervous about presenting online. I know, for example, my husband, who is a great presenter, got very nervous when he was asked to make a video and had to write himself 3 pages of script. And I'm very much against that. Learning lines, learning words, working off a script is a skill, and it takes time and practice. And it's not something you really want to burden yourself with. So for that reason, I say prepare all you like, but actually the speaking bit should be natural, should flow. Of course, bullet points, of course, maybe a list of moving from one topic to the next, but avoid scripting as far as is possible. I find it really gets in the way. And what ends up happening is that if you have words that you've learned or a script, is that you focus much more on remembering the words than actually speaking naturally from the heart, as it were. So don't burden yourself with a script and be natural, however scary that can be. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Okay, so we've breathed, we've slowed down, we've prepped, but we haven't rehearsed too much, a little bit. Let's get on to some practicalities. Now, framing. My framing isn't ideal today. I don't know why. I did check it beforehand and I seem to have slightly kind of sunk down. But it's what they call newsreader format or presenter format. You basically want to see most of you and definitely your face in the screen. And the main thing that I see people doing is looking down into their screen. And you'll see it all over television with really professional people doing it as well, because they've got their laptop on their desk and they're looking down into it. It's so unflattering, let me tell you. And it also is kind of a weird perspective for the viewer. So where possible, look directly into the camera, or if you want it to be super flattering, look slightly up. That's my tip for framing. With lighting, people can tie themselves in knots trying to get the lighting right. First of all, you do need good lighting, because although our devices, our phones and our laptops are pretty amazing these days, every camera needs a lot of light in order to be able to focus. If you find yourself focused 9 times out of 10, it's because you haven't got enough light on your face. The best way to do it is to sit in front of a window. Natural light is your friend. It's also super flattering. So where you can, if you're not obviously at night time, sit in front of a window. If you are recording at night or it's very dark where you are, then just make sure you've got as many lights at your disposal as possible and fiddle around and try and get that right. At the moment, I've got some extra lighting behind the laptop here because it is about to go dark where I am. So slightly worried that I might end up without enough light. But it's one of those things that you can practice with when you have time. I also take my device around my space, wherever that may be, whether you're at work or at home, and I work out, because sometimes if you have a white wall, it can bounce the light back quite nicely. So it's a question of sort of experimenting and finding what works. But generally, if you sit in front of a window, that is the absolutely best sort of lighting. Okay, so appearance. Now, I'm not going to tell you what to wear on screen. That's entirely up to you. But I would say that certain things can distort. Bright white is one that can pick up colours. And I've seen people wearing very white shirts that look kind of green or sometimes kind of purple, depending a little bit on the lighting. And I've also seen people with stripes, particularly very thin stripes, that look kind of like an optical illusion, like they're moving or something. It's really bizarre. So I always tell people to avoid bright white and avoid stripes. That's kind of the main thing. Other than that, I think something plain and not too much jewelry, because it can be distracting. But again, it's personal choice. The main ingredients is you, and we absolutely want you to be you. Oh, tech and audio. These are the things that give me palpitations, because I love presenting, I love talking, I'm happy to be on screen, but the tech terrifies me. What if my internet goes off? What if something stops working? What if? All I can say with tech is to test, and test again. Have a backup if you possibly can. I know that's not always possible. And the really important thing is your audio. And again, a lot of people don't realize that these inbuilt microphones are brilliant, but you really have to be quite close. So you may have framed yourself beautifully here, but it's no good for the microphone. It won't pick you up. Similarly, don't go too close. This is what we call moon face. And again, that can distort on your microphone. A really great tip for audio is those headphones, really cheapy ones that you get with mobile phones nowadays, and they have a little tiny microphone. They're brilliant because they really focus the sound, and they just work really well. They cost next to nothing, and you've probably got several pairs lying around at home, but I can really recommend using those. And I would, if I could find mine, but I can't. So, right, so that's our practicalities. And let's move on now to talking about connecting with your audience. Oh, first of all, an example. This is from one of my little videos that I do called Don't Look Down, and you can see it's kind of weird, isn't it? I feel like I'm in a bucket or something, and someone's looking down on me. And this one is me, I think, yes, having to do something in my bathroom. That particular day, it was the acoustics were best and the lighting was best in my bathroom. It looks very bizarre, but you know, these are the things you do. Okay, let's move on then, connecting with your audience. So top tip, top actors tip, the camera is your friend. As in, don't think about it as a piece of equipment. Don't think about the fact that you may be teaching 30 people, talking to 100 people, presenting to 1,000 people. Think instead of that camera as one person. A friendly person is usually best, and that's the person that you're speaking to. That also counts if you're doing audio and you don't have camera. If you're just using a microphone, then the microphone is your friend. And that helps for a few reasons. One is that it takes the kind of fear away if you're overwhelmed by the thought of having an audience. Secondly, it makes it more personal and more intimate. In a professional way, obviously, it's a way of connecting. So if I'm talking to you and I'm imagining that I'm actually talking to my friend, it makes me sound more natural. It gives me a bit of confidence. It makes the conversation, even though it's one-sided, it helps the conversation to flow. So top tip, think of the camera or the microphone as your friend, and that's who you're speaking to, and that'll help with that rapport and connection. So eye contact, obviously, with the camera is important. Lots of people, and I think it's interesting on these sort of webinars and when you're getting comments and things. I know I do it myself sometimes on when I do a live on Facebook, is I tend to look down at where the comments are as if I'm talking to someone down there, but try and stay focused on your camera. Obviously, that's where people are looking. Okay, energy. This is a really interesting one because you do need a bit of extra energy for screen. The screen has a tendency to somehow flatten or dull your natural presence that you would have in a classroom. And so you need to give it a little bit of extra energy when you're presenting on a screen. One of the ways I do that is to do power postures. And I don't know if you've heard of power postures. I'm actually going to talk about them in the last section. And the other thing is to kind of psych yourself up, get excited, get enthusiastic. And I think as teachers, you kind of do that naturally anyway. Teaching and acting is very similar. You have to put everything that's happened beforehand to one side and focus on that moment, on being with your students and giving them the lesson that you've prepared. And so give yourself a bit of an extra, bit of fizz, and that energy will help translate onto screen. So authenticity, that means you being you, quite simply. And I think that's really important. Lots of people think that once you're on a screen, you have to be somehow special, perfect, different. Oh, I've got to put my professional face on, which is true to some extent, but it's still you. We still want to see you, hear your voice, watch you make mistakes, because we all do, and that's human. And yeah, I mean, if you want to wear spots and stripes and bright white and giant earrings, do you know what? That's fine. Because at the end of the day, what really translates on a screen is you being authentically you. And that's really, really important. You don't have to be perfect. And I think, again, lots of people get caught up in that. Okay, owning the stage, right? This is one of my favorite things. Now, you may not be on a physical stage, of course, if you're online, which is such a shame. And you're not even in the classroom with all those bodies in front of you. But this is your workplace. This is what you do. And so this is your space. And it's entirely yours to do with what you will. And most of all, to feel comfortable in. This is your platform. This is what you do. So owning the stage in a physical context would be to maybe use all of the space that you have. Some people do it, particularly comedians. You see them walking up and down and literally using all of the stage. And I guess what I mean by owning the stage online is that it's your platform. So be comfortable with it and know that this is your workplace and this is where you teach from. And so it belongs to you. Own it and enjoy it. That's the most important thing. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about the things I get asked most of all when it comes to working online. When it comes to presenting, I guess, I feel like as teachers, you've got most of this stuff nailed down already. I feel confident that you're doing, and that hopefully you get excited by getting into a classroom, whether it's online or in real life. But some people do get nervous. And the best thing you can do for nerves is to breathe. Now, a calming breath, and this is really important, two things about a calming breath. One is it's in through the nose and out through the mouth, because that triggers your parasympathetic nervous system, if you want to get technical. So you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And the second most important thing is that the out breath is longer than the in breath. And again, there's lots of science to explain this, but all you need to know is take a lovely deep breath in, and I like to think of a slow breath, not necessarily a deep breath, but a slow breath in. And when you breathe out, make sure that breath is longer. So count to 3 when you breathe in and count to 5 when you breathe out. Do that a minimum of 3 times, and you will physically feel calmer. I promise you. And it's a practice thing. I think the more you do it, the more it will help you. And that's really useful. I've got other tips as well, but that would be my number 1 tip, the calming breath, I call it. Confidence, yeah. You can't just put a cloak of confidence on, unfortunately, but there are things that you can do to feel more confident. Over preparing and under rehearsing, I would say. Taking action, but small steps. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about power postures here, and they can kind of ignite your energy, get your excitement going, and also make you feel really strong. The power postures, as you might imagine, are a little bit like being a superhero. So you could do a Superman power posture, yeah, or you could do imagine that you're on stage and you're Mick Jagger in a concert and you're just soaking up the applause and do a sort of, yeah. It usually involves fists, I have to say, power postures. They're going to look daft, you're going to feel silly, that's okay, no one's going to see you, but they do just ignite that bit of energy and excitement into your body, and generally, I think, make you feel a bit more confident, like, yeah, I've totally got this. Okay, losing the audience. Oh, everybody's worst nightmare. In a physical setting, it's easy to tell when you've lost the audience. Everybody starts fidgeting, they start looking around, there's coughing, there's rustling. You know that people have lost focus. Online, it's more difficult. Often, presenting online is like presenting into a vacuum because you're not getting that feedback, you're not getting that energy. So it can feel as if they're not really with you already. But I guess as teachers, you already know lots of brilliant ways to engage the audience and to be interactive. That's really important, I think. Being interactive and getting lots of comments, lots of, I think sometimes you can do a hand up, obviously the Q&As, and I know that you've got lots and lots of things up your sleeves to check that your students are with you and that your audience are engaged. Now, let's not forget that actually working online is tiring. It's much more tiring, I think, than being in a classroom. So, for example, when I'm teaching acting students, our sessions are maximum an hour and a half because we find that after that, everybody's just simply exhausted, teachers and students alike. So working online is not the same as working in real life. And it can be, it just, you know, it's that extra bit of having to be on all the time and having to be alert, which is quite exhausting. Right, now I need to do a time check here. I don't know who's looking after me. I've realised that I'm not entirely sure how much time I've got left. If someone can let me know, that would be great. I'm just going to talk very quickly about the inner critic, because I've been doing some inner critic work. I hope that you know that the voice in your head telling you that you're not good enough and that what you're rubbish and that you should be doing something else and that no one's listening and that you totally don't know what you're doing and who do you think you are is not part of you. It's a voice, and we call it the inner critic because it's there actually to stop you from taking risks. And the inner critic wants to keep you in your comfort zone. And according to the inner critic, your comfort zone is to really do nothing at all. So it sounds kind of weird, but getting to know your inner critic as a separate entity, I think, is really useful. I think realizing that we all have an inner critic and we all have that inner voice is really useful. Realizing that it's always going to be there. I'm afraid you can't switch it off. But being able to put it aside and decide not to listen to it, or decide that, yes, I've heard what you're saying, but I'm now going to go my own way, I think is just really useful. And that's for anybody, obviously, not just teachers, but really anybody working these days. I think the inner critic is something that can be really destructive. And particularly for actors, I mean, you know, we're famous for being anxious and needing a lot of reassurance. Because we don't only have inner critics, we have the film critics and the theatre critics to deal with as well. So that was just something I wanted to say very quickly at the end there. Did I hear someone just? I don't know. I'm just going to have a quick check. Okay. And oh, hi David. Am I on time? Am I running over?
You have 1 more minute.
Perfect. And because I've got one more slide. So that's brilliant. My goodness, here we go. This is, I can see there are no questions, so I can gloss over that. This is just how to find me. If you want to know more, I post up little helpful videos around breathing, posture, confidence, all of that. And I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to connect with me on all of these different platforms. And I just want to take this time to thank you, David, for the invitation. And thank you all for being here and being part of this wonderful conference. I'm really delighted. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that Inspire today. I think it was really fascinating how much we can, as English teachers and English trainers, learn from the world of acting, especially when we are working online and we're working on the screen. Really useful, very practical tips. Really love those power postures. We'll be trying those ones out.